morning. It's Monday, June 25th, 9 a.m. This is the Muscatine County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First is to review the agenda.
Moved. Second.
Got a motion by Nathan, a second by Jeff. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next is receive comments from the public. Is there anyone that would like to come forward and address the board on a specific issue that's not on the agenda? Seeing no one come forward, we will move on to number 4, discussion and possible action to approve claims dated June 25th, 2018 in the amount of $841,135.95.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Bob. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 5, discussion and possible action to approve a class specification and grade recommendation to revise the lead legal secretary position to lead legal secretary / paralegal.
Perfect timing.
That's excellent.
It is only 9:01
We're moving right along. Morning, Alan.
Good morning. We talked about this at length in the budget process, so I don't want to replow the same ground. Everybody knows what we're talking about and everything. So you've appropriated dollars to do this for this reclassification. It's just it has to get updated by you actually approving the change. So I can do the whole spiel or answer any specific questions you want, or however you like.
Give me a little upgrade on why you want to do this, why we need to do this.
It's partially it's recognizing the experience that I have in that person and utilizing her skill set in a much better way and making the job description reflect what we actually want her to be doing. So in allocating responsibilities in the office, she'll be taking a much more active role with helping lawyers get prepared for trial, doing a lot of the work it takes for organization so that lawyers can be using their time more efficiently, getting exhibits organized, a trial notebook organized so that the lawyer can focus on actually doing more lawyering tasks and be more efficient as well. So it's something I wanted to do for a while, utilizing the skills that she has when I hired her. So.
Is she still doing the collections as well?
We're going to de-emphasize that because I have 2 really good people doing collections, and we've had some stability in those positions, and they are full speed ahead on that. So I really don't think Christy needs to be spending her time except as, you know, I mean, maybe if we had a medical leave or something like that. I just don't really see a need for Christy to be doing collections anymore because the 2 people I have over there they're doing great work, and the second person in that office, Teresa, she's been there long enough. I mean, she's really up to speed. So.
Well, I remember talking about this in budgets, and I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation.
I'll second.
I've got a motion by Matt, a second by Jeff.
Nancy,
Yeah,
so what's the differential dollars and cents between the grade 10 and 11?
it's about a $4,000 difference.
$4,000 a year difference?
And just so you're aware, there's 2 actions that you need to take here. The one that you just made a motion on is to approve the job description, the grade placement, and then you'll vote to actually move Christy from where she's at now to the new position.
Okay.
So is there any more discussion on this first issue? Board?
So odds are you probably won't be coming back for another person now after this one gets elevated.
Well, no, I mean, I
Don't
just
plan on that.
I don't see. I mean, unless there was some. Well, I mean, you never know what you can't foresee, right? But I mean,
Yeah, but if you
in
were
terms of
planning
how
on
we're
it, you don't.
functioning, right? No. I mean, there's nothing like that. I mean, I think that in the next budget cycle, I'd like to look at the numbers with the board on the fine collection as to whether we thought we need another person to capture more dollars than we're capturing. I don't think that we're at that point, but that's something that we'd be looking at numbers 6 months from now and talk to the board about where we are, but I just don't, I don't
Has there
see
been any
anything else.
talk on the fine collection, Alan, or any legislative differences on that? That agreement you made last year with the court system, it's all, that's all water under the bridge where everybody's happy?
There was really nothing of substance in the last legislative session. Frankly, the numbers statewide are really good, and I don't see any reason that would be changed. You never know what somebody might come up with, but really that thing is working.
Have there still been just a handful of county attorneys that have done this in their own counties, or are they all doing more like we are?
So fine collection is growing. I couldn't tell you the exact number, but there's several counties that have added fine collection because of this. Our association was, we were pretty active in pushing that among counties that weren't doing fine collection so that we could send the message to the legislature that, hey, we're committed to this statewide as county attorneys to doing it. So we have added some counties. It's really very low population counties that are not doing it at this point. So.
Alan, remind me now of your total staffing and how it's, how it's segregated between departments or
Sure.
job responsibilities.
So 4 assistant county attorneys, and then 6 support staff. So I have my lead legal secretary, who would be designated paralegal under this, and then 2 legal secretaries in addition to her, and then a victim witness coordinator, and then 2 people in the fine collection operation. So a total of 4 lawyers and 10 support, or 6 support staff, or 10 total employees that report to me.
So, total though is, what, 16 altogether?
No.
No, I misspoke. So 4 lawyers, 6 support staff, total of 10.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's what I want to know. And no anticipation of any additional employees with this move, it's just
Yeah.
strictly going to elevate this individual to,
Right.
basically, get her salary in range with her responsibilities, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay. With that, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next is discussion and possible action to approve a request from County Attorney Alan Oxygen to reclassify Christina Hayden from a lead legal secretary grade 10 to a lead legal secretary paralegal grade 11.
Second.
Motion by Nathan, second by Jeff.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I forgot to ask you on this, I apologize, but, so on this differential on the grade, the move up on the grade, was there a certification or anything like that for Christina to go to / paralegal? Is there some education there that she's taken, or is she need to take, or where are we at with that?
There are paralegal course offerings out there. There's not a really good kind of gold standard certification for it. And there's some, not to be demeaning, but there's some more like for-profit business college type course formats where they're selling a paralegal package that I don't really know if you get a lot of value out of that. So hers is based on work experience of 20 plus years in both a private law firm and then working in my office, and the kind of work that she did in the private firm and then can be doing for me. Mm-hmm. So it's much more of a practical designation than going out and getting
Is that something we need to look at, though? Is that something she need to have eventually?
I looked at that. The problem would be I'd be spending a fairly significant amount of money to get her a paralegal certificate that would be very general. Like if you go into a paralegal program, you're going to learn how to be a paralegal for a lawyer doing bankruptcy work and a paralegal for a lawyer doing family law stuff. And she's really going to be doing paralegal work for criminal prosecutors. And so we'd be paying for a training program that it would only be a small slice of that would be what I want out of it.
Okay. Kind of where I'm coming from, Alan, is more practical state, I guess. So that by not being certified as a paralegal of some degree, there's no reason why this lady can't do the work, right? And it be,
Right.
and it be acceptable in a legal standard.
Right, and in terms of that, the fact she's working for a licensed attorney is what's the important thing.
Covers it.
There's no official paralegal license or anything like that that the state requires. It's more just the title.
Appreciate the
Yeah,
clarification.
sure.
And for clarification, when you vote on this, it would be effective July 1st. That's when the money's in the budget for it to begin.
If there's no more discussion, I have a motion by Nathan, a second by Jeff. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay,
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
gentlemen.
Number 6, items with County Treasurer Amy Zybarth, and Nancy's gonna take the lead on this. A is discussion and possible action to approve resolution 06-25-1801, abating taxes on a parcel owned by the city of Muscatine.
Then there was a resolution in your packet, per the code of Iowa. If the city asks us to abate these taxes, the code says the board shall do that, so.
Okay.
So is that the same for county-owned property in the city? That they shall abate taxes?
Yes, whenever we own property, yep,
Okay,
taxes are abated.
good.
I'll move to approve that.
Second.
I got a motion by Jeff, a second by Matt. This is a roll call vote.
What's the amount of that, Nance?
It is,
11,000.
no, what, the part that you guys are abating is the
1575?
11,641.
Okay, so it's, then is it more than one parcel?
No, it's one parcel, there's just
Just an
taxes.
accumulation?
Yeah, there's taxes back to 2014.
All right.
Do you know anything about the owner of this parcel?
It's the building over on the corner,
Fifth and
across,
Mulberry.
yeah, Fifth of Mulberry.
You know, the one
So
that,
they're finally taking some action. Good. I don't want that to
It's
fall
not the-
down on somebody.
It's not the
The
one in
restaurant?
Demarest?
No,
What's that tax, is that the second part of it?
what do you,
No.
what are you reading that,
I'm looking at item 6, a resolution, the pages 2 and 3, the tax charge information sheet that we got in our packet, Ninth Wonder Incorporated.
oh,
that was who
That was
was the
previous
previous
owner.
owner.
right.
Got it.
That's the address of the
Previous owner?
previous owner, yeah. That was the mailing address for the previous
Oh,
owner,
okay.
Ninth Wonder Inc.
Okay. If there's nothing further, I've got a motion by Jeff, a second by Matt. This is a roll call vote. Jeff,
Aye.
Matt,
Alright,
Bob,
Aye.
Nathan,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Motion passes. B is discussion and possible action to request to upgrade Allison Mathis from a Treasurer's Clerk 3, grade 7, to a Treasurer's Clerk 2, grade 8.
Again, the funding for this was in your packet. The last time that we did the salary study, at the consultant's recommendation, we created 3 levels of treasurer's clerks, with the idea that as they get more experienced and become more valuable to the office, they have an opportunity to move up through those grades. And so this is the last of the treasurer's clerk 3s, that would be moved to a treasurer's clerk 2. And what Amy asked me to share with you is, she has proven to be a quick learner, great attention to detail, and valuable addition to our staff.
How long has she been there?
I believe 3 years.
it's long enough to know.
Yep. I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Nancy. Number 7, public hearing on a request from Victor W. Swayze II or Carol J. Swayze, record owners, to rezone approximately 44 acres located in 76 Township from A1 Agricultural District to R1 Residential district.
Morning.
Yeah, this property is located just west of town. It sits between 231st Street, G28, and Burlington Road, so that bluff between G28 and Burlington Road. In the area of where Funk's Hill, just on the west side of Funk's Hill, where it cuts up from Burlington Road to G28. Zoning Commission held a public hearing on this request, and it was actually died because of a tie vote, which there was only 4 commission members present that day, so the tie vote is a no vote. However, an applicant has the right to take the request to the Board of Supervisors, which they have done at this point. You'll see, I believe you have a copy of my development report. I've taken language from the comprehensive plan that speaks to rezoning agriculturally zoned land to residential for development potential. There's not one part of this property, as you can imagine, between 28 and Burlington Road that's farmland. That's a bluff area. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. CSR, this ground is in the low 30s. There's never been farm ground, tillable ground on it. G28, for the first couple miles out from the city limits, is recognized as a rural residential corridor. As you're familiar with the Hilltop additions, Hickory Hills, it is a paved road. Burlington Road in that area is a seal coat road. This property, like I said, is sandwiched between, so there's frontage on both those portions. There was some opposition from neighbors, which we understand when anytime someone looks at development potential. I don't believe it's the intent of the owner at this point to develop a subdivision. They are here if you want to ask them any specific questions. However, when you look at our ordinances, when it talks about rezoning or houses in rural areas, you're familiar with one of the other mechanisms that can be used to build a house on A1 property, and that's a special use permit through the Board of Adjustment. However, that rural residence special use permit ordinance states that if a property is particularly well suited for residential development, that rezoning should be pursued. That was the direction that I gave the applicant based on this property, its location, its extremely low ag value, and its proximity to existing residential development. You can see, I believe in your packets, I gave you a copy of a current zoning map that shows you the residential district in the area already. So that would show that this type of action would be consistent with surrounding land uses. And given the low agricultural use of this property, potential use, the paved roads, the fact it's a residential corridor, I steered them towards rezoning.
So it's right across from Ridgeview Drive over there?
It's a little farther west
A
than
little
that.
farther west,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Just west of Funk's Hill.
It's
Yep.
just west of Funk's
Just
Hill.
west of Funk's Hill.
So Eric, this rezoning request will simply make it R1, which would allow someone to build a house on
I
it.
see, okay, all right.
If they were to do any further residence, it would have to go through the subdivision process, correct?
Absolutely. And you know, one of the reasons, in addition to this site, in my mind, being particularly well suited for residential development, a special use permit for a rural residence. Yes, could they have gotten one from the Board of Adjustment? Possibly, most probably. However, you're familiar with the separation distances. It would greatly limit where a person could build their house because you have to maintain at least 750, preferably 1,250 feet from any other residences. Where, because this is so similar to surrounding residential use, we would expect, you know, development down the road, and this would be, they shouldn't be tied to those separation distances that we try to maintain out in the rural areas where we're not looking, where we are looking to avoid residential type densities. And
So the purpose of this is to be able to put in a residence without the A1 restrictions?
well, that would be the purpose at this point for the owner, but we, you know, we're looking at this long term. Should they, and I don't believe they currently have any desires to do that, but should they ever decide to look at development or be approached by a potential developer, you know, we look at, is it a good piece of ground for that? And according to our comprehensive plan, it would appear that it is, that it could be developed someday. Again, it's a whole separate process, as Jeff mentioned. It'd be limited because, you know, it wouldn't be a very large subdivision because of the terrain. But if you're familiar with that area, there's some very successful subdivisions that are tucked into some of those draws, wooded, very wooded lots, small lawns. You know, there's popularity for that type of development down the road. And so I steered them towards rezoning because I think it's appropriate for future
And
development.
that would require a separate approval by us.
Oh, absolutely. Zoning
You have to go through
commission.
the subdivision process.
Yeah, there'd
so
have to be a whole
There's
preliminary
hearings
plat.
and everything for that, so
Why
the
do we have to
neighbors.
rezone all 44 acres?
That's the property that they own that would be under their control for potential development if they want.
But if they wanted to build, couldn't we rezone 5 acres in a building site and keep it in A1, and the rest of it, the other 39 acres?
Certainly you could. Certainly you could. They put on their application the property that they owned. And I guess the question that I posed, or the question that I posed in response to that question is, what would be the reason for limiting them to, if it meets the criteria for future residential development, what would be the reason for limiting them down the road and having to go through the process again, should they want to develop, or a future owner, if they sell the property? We try to look at it, is it conducive to residential development or not, regardless of what, you know, the immediate desire of the owner is at this point.
But it said in here, there's no interest, nor is that the intent. It's a single dwelling is all they're wanting to build on there, so.
Right now, right.
But if they did a split, you'd have to go through a rezoning process and.
Potentially, depending on how little or how much they would rezone on a single parcel, they would maybe have to split an existing parcel, and that may trigger subdivision anyway. It wouldn't necessarily trigger full-scale residential subdivision standards if there's no roads, no streets, if it's for a single
It
house.
just adds costs.
But, you know, we're looking at
You got a survey.
there's
legal
starting to
work.
be quite an interest. You know, I think we need to start thinking about where some of our next development's gonna be. Real estate is moving quite heavily and fast right now, and there are people looking for acreages. Again, I don't want to indicate that that's their desire, but I think it's
Eric, you had two positive, two negative, whatever. Tie vote. I want to hear the other side of the story, the ones that voted against it. What was their reasoning?
I can only assume, based on kind of some of the statements they made, there was some neighborhood opposition. Again, we understand that. Anytime you look at developing, some people don't want addition, they've liked living where they live with a very low density. Those two members, it's my opinion, voted against it because they felt that there was a single residence option. It was more of an appeasement. And I believe they erred in not looking at the totality of whether it meets the criteria of the comprehensive plan or not. They were giving strong consideration to neighbor opposition, trying to understand the concerns of the neighbors.
Couple questions, I'm gonna ask the second one first. Are any of the pros and or the neighbors of the residents here to speak to?
I believe there are, yes.
Also, it looks, so this parcel, or these 4 parcels together would extend all the way from G28 on top of the hill to Burlington Road on the bottom. It looks like there's already an agricultural operation at that southernmost parcel, a hen house, a dairy barn, that sort of thing. How's the change to an R1 going to affect those operations?
It would have no effect whatsoever.
Any grandfathered in?
Farming is actually a permitted use in any of our zoning districts. Just because you would successfully rezone a property to residential, you could continue to farm it. We have lots of examples out there that was rezoned for future use, but they're still actively
But I'm
farmed.
guessing there's some more intensive uses of farming that wouldn't be permitted in a residential, like a hog lot, for instance.
Feeding facilities.
You would,
That's why I'm very pessimistic about these developments going on in an already established farming setup, because there are, the DNR heavily regulates where those feeding facilities can be and what the setbacks are.
right.
Wells, residences, stuff like that. So if you have a family that's been farming there for 50 years, 100 years, and you know, you got the next generation coming in and they want to expand, but they can't because we just let a subdivision in there on A1 resident or property.
Yeah, and you're correct. And I would not foresee residential development continuing too much further to the west beyond this area, because as you drive out, particularly along the G28 up up on the uphill side. It begins to open up from a wooded ravine area, not far to the west of this, to more farm ground. There is one hog confinement off G28, however, it's over 2 miles from any of this property. And again, I really, things begin to change as you go. You would get outside of a 2-mile development area as well. We're right on the very edge of that with this potential property. This is the area where the future land use map would suggest we would probably see some residential development. Much beyond that, no. We would have those concerns because you have more open farm ground, you have more swine production. But in this immediate vicinity, I don't see any location that someone would try to put up another hog confinement. It's still wooded and ravined, and along the bottom of Burlington Road, I don't know that there'd be a hog confinement that could go in on a hillside like that. Beyond, much beyond off G28, certainly there's that potential, there's that use.
Setback across G28 Burlington Road, on the flats down there.
Right, but we've seen none of that type of agricultural activity anywhere in that, what we call the island area, or even that area up to Burlington Road. Crop grounds certainly, but other than very small, old, private operations with a few cows or a few pigs, there isn't that type of intensity. You get farther down Burlington Road, there's fairly large grain operations, but that's several miles down the road.
What's the flooding situation there right across the parcel from Burlington?
I don't think it goes quite that far. It could come somewhat close in areas, but I don't believe.
That would rule out any hog confinement, wouldn't it?
Well, certainly in areas, yes, it would in a floodplain, yes, or make it very difficult.
They're building up now too in those kind of areas.
Some of them.
They'll raise it up.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
So it's pretty hard to.
I guess I'd like to hear from the folks
Sure,
who are
yes.
parties.
Yep.
Let's start with the 4 and then.
Yeah.
we get is-
Please state your name and address, if you would, please.
I'm Carol Swayze, 605 320th Street in West Liberty.
And I'm Wesley Swayze. I'm currently staying at 605 320th Street in West Liberty.
One of the questions on the table right now is the possibility of hog confinement. I would like to point out that the agricultural buildings that are there have not been used in approximately 50 years. The feed lot is, well, if we could afford to take it out, it would be gone because everything's rusty, non-operational, too expensive to ever get it going again. The barn has not been used since the early 70s. We have no intention of using animals here. No pigs for sure because of religious belief. No animals, no farm animals because of time involvement. My son just wants to build a home there on the property. He grew up there running those gullies and ravines and has very strong emotional attachment to the property. One of the objections I thought I picked up from one of the neighbors was she pointed out that a couple of the properties there on Burlington Road were kind of junky, a lot of junk. But I'd like to point out that since we owned this for the last 15 years, got it from my father-in-law, we've cleaned it up. Everything looks nice. It's kept well mowed. It is not an eyesore for the community. We've done our best, and we will continue to do our best to keep it a rural situation. And our neighbors probably won't even know when we go out the driveway.
And where were you thinking, or maybe sir, where are you thinking of putting the home?
There's a flat parcel of land near G28. There's a lane that leads in that used to lead to an old sawmill that was present years and years ago and is no longer there. But there's a flat parcel of land up maybe 700 feet from G28 that just kind of juts out into the middle of a bunch of gullies, and that's the proposed site.
How far west of the road of Funk's Hill are we talking there, down G28, you suppose?
You're talking about 700 feet, I think,
No parcel between Funk's Hill and theirs.
700 to 800 feet.
House would go here.
Oh, I see now.
Ma'am, I just wanted to clarify, it's not just
I see,
your
thank you.
land that it affects as far as livestock goes, it's your neighbors as well because of different setbacks. And that's what I wanna protect.
I can understand
Because
that and
they
appreciate
own
that.
that land around you for years and years and years, that's an established farm. If you build a house there and let's say the next generation, their next generation wants to move in and expand that farm operation and they wanna build a feeding facility and they can't because of a house or because of a subdivision, you know, that's not right. That is agricultural ground.
Well, I guess I would point out that the property is owned by a farmer who lives in Illinois. If he had any kind of animal operation there, it would be extremely difficult for him to maintain that.
You speaking of the Paces or the Jacksons?
I'm speaking of Tom Watson.
Watson,
Yes. He owns the property across from us. He uses our ag buildings to store his equipment.
Carol, one of the things that is always so hard for people to understand in situations like this, and this is both sides, that the actions that's taken now are far-reaching into the future. And even though there is no intent by you guys, other than for the son to put up a house and so forth, as Matt was saying, it affects others around him, and the changing of the zoning and so forth is hard to change to anything else thereafter. I mean, it's not you folks and your ideas or the others that may be opposed, it's what comes years and years down the line. So we have to be very, very careful of our actions so that we don't create a situation that's gonna be bad for others in the future and utilize the land to what, you know, its residents, overall majority of residents in the state want, which is ag. So we're always very, very careful. I mean, I look at the property, I can't imagine somebody, you know, interested in farming any of that. However, 2 points, one to Matt's point of adjacent property owners, and then you made one point yourself. Apparently, there was some type of farming or livestock at one time, so it has been used for that. It could be used for that. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm pro or against anything here. I'm still thinking about it. But what I'm saying is the decisions made are far-reaching. You can't always just take it personal. Any decision that's made that, oh, we're pro or against. It's what is the potential long-term good of the county.
If I might speak just towards some of the separation distances for potential future hog confinements or large beef, anything that would trigger DNR permitting or separation distance criteria. This house would really not, short of a small area directly to the south out in that almost island area, would not affect any new hog confinement because there are residents along G28 farther west than this one. They're rural residences that are on smaller acreages. This would not be the nearest, if a new house was built rezoning, it would not be the nearest house that would be even measured on a separation distance. If you look west of this proposed property, particularly on the north side along G28, there's still a considerable amount of wooded area that would separate anything that would be considered viable for hog confinements. Directly to the south, there is some farm ground right south of Burlington Road. But again, there's already some houses along Burlington Road that would be in that separation distance anyway. I totally understand.
But
what
the
you're talking
owner's
about.
house is kind of void to that separation distance.
Right, but some of these houses are not farmers, even west of theirs.
I understand, I know the area.
Today.
Yeah, I'm right. You know, I'm personally interested, not so much in the hog confinement, because just looking at the terrain, I think it's a pretty low probability that anybody wanted to do that. And frankly, just because somebody might someday want to put in something that would be a conflicting use, doesn't mean that we have to hold this land hostage in perpetuity. You know, if this is, and it does look like that it may be in accordance with our, you know, ultimate land plan, you know, I'm pretty inclined to see it go forward, but I'd like to hear from all
Whose
sides.
ultimate land plan though, cause I
Well, the
bet
county's.
it wasn't the owners and the owners around them.
They all.
Well, that's why I want to hear, that's why I want to
They
hear
all
from
get the
them.
opportunity to give their opinions.
Well, the thing that I go, you know, I look at, you know, I don't see anything in our zoning regulations that would say this is, shouldn't be able to do this. And the second thing is, you know, the big concern to me and the concern long-term with this land to me would be any further residential development on the property, because I think that whole area, is, there's stability problems on that ridge. We have, we have road problems in there. And I don't know how much residential development we really want to encourage there. It is part of our comprehensive plan, but still, if that goes forward, if anybody were to do a residential development, there's an entire process, the subdivision process, that you'd have to go through. You'd have to have public hearings, you'd have to come back before the zoning board, they'd have to make a recommendation, you'd have to come back before this board. So I'm very confident that there are plenty of stop gaps in there to continue. But to me, I always want to make sure that the current landowners, we don't trump on their rights either. Because, it is their property, it's been in their hands for a number of years, and it seems pretty straightforward to me.
It's hard for me to see on Magic, how much tillable ground, I know you said the CSR was incredibly low, how much tillable ground's on this? Any?
The ground is being proposed 0, it's the bluff.
That's what I thought.
Maybe a little knob where a house could go, but I don't believe there's even a hayfield in there.
No.
They do own farm ground, I believe, south of Burlington Road that they already.
No, that's all been sold.
So this is part of a large older family farm, but the farm ground's still being farmed that they own. This portion, these 4 parcels are all on the bluff, 0 tillable ground.
Mr. Swayze, I understood you correctly that your access would be from G28?
Yes, sir.
My assumption would be that,
And it's already, there's already an access there, sounded like from an old
Yes, there is.
sawmill road or something.
I mean, it doesn't show up here, but it wouldn't necessarily.
yeah, I would assume that was used as a timber pasture years ago would be my assumption.
I believe it was.
Sure it was.
About 60 years ago.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Anyone other like to speak for? Please. For or against, I don't care.
We can sort it out.
We can sort it out. State your name and address, please.
And figure it out, huh? My name is Janice A. Knoll, and I live and own property located at 2566 Burlington Road. I am again expressing my opposition to the proposed rezoning of the 44 acres located on Burlington Road, owned by Victor and Carol Swayze, having the county address of 2294 Burlington Road, from A1 Ag District to R1 Residential. I understand that the city and/or county would like to rezone Ag 1 land that is up to 2 miles outside of the city limits to R1. I have no problem with looking toward the future and allowing residential development to take place. I don't believe the Burlington Road is an area conducive to this future plan. The land along this road is either cropland on the southeast side of the bluff, and on the bluff side, the land is located between deep ravines and waterways that flow from the top of the bluff. Out of the total 45 properties listed on Burlington Road, 43 are zoned A1 Ag District. The remaining 2 properties were rezoned to R1 Residential Single Family Large Lot when they were sold in 2001 and 2002, and located within the 2-mile rule from the city limits. One of the property owners is using it as a junkyard, and the other property owner is raising livestock on it when it is less than 2 acres required by the zoning regulations. The road along the bluff is blacktop, but has no paving markings or shoulders. There are deep ditches along the bluff side of the road and steep drop-offs to the fields located on the opposite side. There's already been a prior sale of 1.17 acres to Robert or Loretta Hopkins on 8/22/2014 by Victor and Carol Swayze from this land. When this sale was made, there should have been a restrictive covenant placed on this land prior to the sale in 2014, according to Article 3, A1 Ag District, Section 2, uses permitted. This covenant states that the seller will limit the use of the remaining contiguous A1 Ag property and is binding upon all heirs, successors, and assigns. I understand there's not a restrictive covenant on this property prior to this sale, and my question is, why not? This property has 12 agricultural buildings located on it, to include 3 silos, 4 utility buildings, and a barn. Therefore, if it is the intent of Victor and Carol Swayze for their son to build a home for personal living, he would be allowed to do so with proper documentation to the Muscatine County Zoning Commission under the A1 Ag zoning codes. It would not require changing the zoning to R1 residential district. The change to R1 zoning would open this property to multiple one-family dwellings and numerous other special uses. I feel this change request is unwarranted and should be denied by the commission. Thank you.
Maybe could I ask you a couple questions? The property you mentioned that you said there should have been a restrictive covenant, where was that again?
That's right. They sold off 1.17 acres to,
Is that right across Burlington Road from the?
yes, it's on the Burlington Road. It's on the bluff side.
Property that we own. It was the property that belonged to the county,
Gotcha.
when they used it for a school.
And why do you say there should have been a restrictive covenant? I guess I just didn't
According
understand.
to the zoning laws, Article, what, I gave you 3, it's right here. I've got the sheet.
And I'm not familiar off the top of my head with
Oh,
that.
okay, well, here.
Yeah, but I'd love to see it. Sure, I
Or-
can. Sure, you wanna talk to that, Eric?
I mean, it's in the zoning regulations.
Okay, thank you.
The requirement for a restrictive covenant, number one, we no longer have that. We did away with that requirement for restrictive covenant a couple of years ago. What triggered, under former zoning codes, what triggered the need for a restrictive covenant wasn't just the sale of a house, but it was when the farmhouse was split off of a contiguous farm. This sale that she's referring to, there was a dwelling on it, but it was already on its own parcel. There was no split at that time that would have triggered the need for a restrictive covenant. The language used to say someone wanting to sell off an existing farmhouse, split it off. It was the parceling off that triggered it, not just the sale of the house. This house that was sold was already on its own parcel. So there wasn't any subdividing of the farm parcel at that point.
So I understand that there's an old farmstead on it. Was there a house site as well with that farmstead?
There was, we tore it down because it was,
Is that where you're wanting to build, in the same proximity?
we built an ag building on the top of it. Old one. Because
Okay,
it had the well, all the well.
all right. So does this property have to be rezoned for them to build a house on it?
Potentially, no, but there would be a lot more limits, and if you look at the language of our code, it specifically says if a property is particularly well suited for residential development, rezoning is the proper.
But they're not asking for development. They, in fact, said specifically they don't intend to develop.
That's correct.
So then I don't see any reason to rezone it. They can build a house with it zoned the way it is. And if they plan to develop, then they can come back and propose at that point. They want one house.
I just try to provide the language from our future, our comprehensive plan that talks to potential future development. When you look at the criteria, rural residential corridors, particularly along the G28 side, that's certainly, I think, apparent here that area within the first few miles out from the city limits is recognized as a rural residential corridor. Paved roads, low ag land value, essentially no limitation on surrounding ag use because of the contiguous timbered land that continues to the west off G20. Even if development was to be pursued, I think because of the comments you guys have shared, you can see that it would be very limited. There are some steep slopes. It would be a fairly small scale subdivision even if they chose it, but that doesn't negate the fact that it would appear that this property does meet the criteria for a potential development area. That was the direction that I gave them based on the language from the code. But to answer your question, I guess point blank, there is another mechanism to build one house. I don't want to mislead you there.
It'd be a special use
It'd be a
permit.
special use permit, and it would potentially, they would be limited by separation distances from any other house, which I guess my opinion was, why should a person be limited on where they want to build their house if the property appears to meet the guidance language from the code for residential areas?
Yeah, Eric, could you give me the names of the board members, how they voted, yea or nay, please?
Is there minutes there that we have?
Yes.
Might be, but he can.
Okay.
I believe that Virginia, Cooper and Carol Schleter voted no. Carl Kleppe, and I want to make sure I quote correctly, and Tom Harper, I believe, voted for it.
Eric, another question, just tying up some loose ends. The concerns that Ms. Knoll raised, the junkyard and the cattle operation, those could be addressed could those be addressed under either nuisance or other legal provisions? That we
Certainly,
they're
and
pending?
during one of the zoning commission hearings, those were raised, and we've begun looking into those issues. The cattle, it's not, I wouldn't call it a cattle operation. There appears to be a parcel, a very small parcel of land that was zoned residential that may have a few, very few, but it still could be considered, it would be considered livestock that would be in violation if it's less than 2 acres. And I believe the parcel she's referring to with livestock is less than 2 acres. You are allowed to have livestock on residential parcels of 2 acres or more, but not less. I believe there may be a parcel of land where someone has a few head of cattle, that would potentially be in violation, and the other would be a nuisance violation that we're working on along with a lot of others.
So, I would say that residential is, if this parcel were zoned residential versus the current A1 ag, residential is actually a more restrictive as far as activities than ag. Is that not correct?
From an agricultural standpoint, no, until you get to the large confinement threshold. If you have a parcel of 2 acres or more, or excuse me, more than 2 acres, you can have livestock. There would be, but in other cases, yes, it could be more, it could be less restrictive, depending on potential commercial uses, towers, that type of thing.
Vehicles, unused vehicles on property, buildings.
It would actually help in some of the nuisance cases if it's a residential area for things like unkept lawns. We don't regulate those in A1 districts, but something that can be considered residential, vegetation length and that type of thing, it becomes more restrictive and easier. And so yes, the nuisance ordinances can become a little bit easier to enforce if it's residential.
Ms. Knoll, this doesn't directly affect your property. Your property looks to be a couple miles down the road, is that correct?
Down the road. It's just this whole area being, especially with these two that were spot zoned to R1. It's the first one that comes onto the Burlington Road. He's now, since I've been doing this and complained, he's evidently gotten a notice, Sean McNally, on the first property. So now he's built a wooden fence, a tree, which is natural, according to the zoning laws, still, and then he's pulled all of his old trucks and things out to block that whole area, to fence it out. I mean, plus he has a timber thing, but that you can't do anything about, from what I understand. So that was spot zoned. Okay, to R1. So now it's a junkyard. So then now, down the road, Leslie Hunter, where the old spring was, I don't know if you're familiar with the spring that just ran continuously. Yeah, he's right across the road. He has 4 cows. It's less than 2 acres, so why aren't these zoning regulations being followed? And then the sheet that I gave you, if that's not in the zoning, why is it still on your site? That's where I got all of this, to see what was going on and what the rules and regulations are. So if you're telling me that was 2 years ago and that's not pertinent, why is it still out there with all of the codes and zoning?
I can answer
And
that
she's
question
already-
if you like.
You can answer that.
They've already taken off.
The county is required at least once every 5 years to adopt a new code of ordinances where you codify everything. Part of that process is you have to, you have some pretty high publication costs, so we'd only do that about once every 3 years. What's on the website is the ordinances, and then listed right below that is all the amendments that you guys have made to those ordinances until the time that we recodify. So that information is also on the website, on the same page that the Code of Ordinances is on.
I want to address the Swayzes. So, I'm in favor of you guys building a house on that property. And I would be in favor of you doing it with a special use permit. But I will not vote in favor of rezoning the whole property. Because if you actually want to build one house, that's your purpose, that's what you said your purpose is, then you should have no problem just doing it with a special use permit.
The one issue being that, there's a neighbor where we would like to put the house on that little island. There's a neighbor's house who's approximately 700 feet away from that location across a deep gully. And we have to maintain 700.
Special use permit would take care of that.
It would take care of that.
The 750 has been a minimum that the Board of Adjustment has taken a very hard line at.
But we've done it in the past, I mean, we've
I can think of only 2 cases where they've allowed less than 750 feet in the last probably 5 to 6 years. And those had actually involved where there was an old remaining foundation, and they recognized because there'd been a house there before. But when you're starting with empty property, they only are subject to, or limited those 2, they hold that.
So if you rezone it, then you don't have to have that.
You have to meet the normal R1 setbacks from your side lot lines, your front lot lines, but there isn't the 750 feet separation.
I'll verify that they've taken a hard line on that.
And they should, because the purpose is to allow sporadic residential uses in the ag district without creating a residential look or feel. That's not what we're looking at when you look at a residential corridor. We have subdivisions in the immediate vicinity. You know, it would be considered consistent with surrounding land uses, certainly to the east. But that's not what the rural resident special use permit process tries to accomplish.
But they could, let's say if we go around the special use permit and rezone 2 or 3 acres R1, would that allow them to build their house with the 700 feet separation?
Yes. Yes.
Then I would be in favor of that, but I'm not in favor of this whole parcel.
And I think the zoning commission kind of wrestled with that too. So then, I guess my question to a proposal like that would be, so if you're willing to rezone 2 acres, the county would then be acknowledging that that area is particularly well suited for residential development. If you're rezoning 2 acres, then you've made that decision, so then why not?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's their property, I want them to be able to build a house on it, but I don't want this to turn into a subdivision.
Well, I think number one, we have, as Jeff said, further safeguards against that if that were ever to come up, that where we would have final approval, yea or nay. And second, I don't see zoning as something that's particularly suited as a spot type of a solution. You definitely don't want, you couldn't have, I don't think, one parcel zone in a couple of different ways. And maybe you could, but more likely you need to survey off a little area, which would be a pretty large expense for these folks. You know, are there any other nays, or any other folks here to speak against the
For it, against it, for it,
Have
against.
we heard from everyone?
Elizabeth?
I wasn't going to speak, but I have no issue with them changing it to R, with the fact that there are the additional
Protections.
protections against subdivisions and stuff like that. So we own, our property now comes up to a portion of there, so where the right of way of the railroad is, does meet with theirs. So we have no issue with them changing it to
Ma'am, would you state your name?
R1. Elizabeth Hackett,
Address, please.
2310 Burlington Road.
Thank you.
Now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
I certainly understand the concerns. I think we have safeguards in place against anything that we don't want coming in there, and I'm not saying we wouldn't want that, I'm just saying we have safeguards in place. Also, it doesn't appear that there's anyone in the immediate vicinity of the property that's here to voice any objection. And certainly understand Ms. Knoll's concerns about misuse of land and how that is a possibility, but I don't think that's more to me of an enforcement issue than a let's not zone it one way or the other issue. I certainly want this land to be kept in a pristine or an attractive condition, whatever its use is. But to me, yeah, it seems that they weren't necessarily asking for they want to build a house, and I think you guys care less about the legal niceties of it than being able to build a house. It just seems that the best way for you to be able to do that is to have this rezoning. You know, I don't necessarily understand why all 4 parcels, I mean, they're a little split up. To me, it only looks like 2 parcels would necessarily need to be rezoned, but the way that they're lying would mean you'd have a patchwork, so.
Could I speak to
Please.
that? This largest piece right here
Yes,
is actually.
the 2 parcels, correct.
Yeah, with this,
Mm-hmm.
right through the middle with the railroad right away, which my father-in-law bought, in the 70s or 80s, can't remember exactly when. So if we rezone, we have to rezone in this big
Correct.
middle piece.
Certainly.
Because the house has to be here.
Is that dot where you're indicating where you're thinking of putting the house?
That dot is number 1, this is number 1.
Oh, that's so
property,
that-
it's major one. Where we have to build because of the gullies, there's a gully comes over here, there's 2 big gullies here. Where we have to build is on a prominent point of
I
land,
see.
right in here.
Just to the southeast of that.
Ma'am, show me, show me the point of access where that ridge runs down to where you're looking at building, because I'm very curious about that.
Access road comes in right here, almost right on the line,
Okay.
and it leads in this direction.
So that's not even your property.
Then
Oh, I see.
it's right over.
It's right on
Yeah,
it's
just
right-
on-
There's
so
a
this
fence
is the
row
parcel.
that separates this property. There's a fence row here. There's fence rows here. So you come down this lane, and then it opens up
So is that an easement
into
or?
this
To the,
area.
to this
No,
ridge
it's on
top
the
right here.
property.
Right,
It's
right,
on your
and then
property.
there's a gully here.
I see it.
There's a gully here that
I
goes
see
all
that.
the way down and around.
Yeah, so you're coming out on this
this
ridge.
It would be right here in
So
this
this would
open
be-
space.
yeah.
And you'll
Preferably
access,
right about here.
yeah, and you'll access right down
Yeah,
here.
through there.
Yeah, right
Yep.
to that
The
point.
existing
And
road.
Glenn,
Where's the existing property? This one right here, is this
is Glenn,
the
is Glenn the closest?
I'm not sure what Nathan that is there.
Glenn, are you the closest?
Yeah.
Would you like to speak on this?
So this is,
State your name and address for me.
Glenn Page, 2146.
so this is where the access is, right here, and
My
the
only
one build
concern
right
is
here.
if you get
So this is,
rezoned to R1,
this is the
there's
floor.
gonna be a subdivision, you know, multiple houses, I don't want that. I'll go along with what Matt was saying, I wouldn't, you know, they can legally build one house already just the way it's set. Why not do it that way? Now,
Well-
the other question I have for Carol is, she stopped after the one meeting we had, the first meeting we had, and explained to me where the house was gonna be built. That's changed.
It's, the understanding of where the property lines on that first 6-acre plot, right on the,
I can't imagine I can't get
Where
7
the driveway comes in from G28,
yeah.
right in that
Yeah,
open.
we, as we went out and looked at it, we realized that we couldn't build.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you're right, it looks like 750, but this is a problem I see everywhere where they keep these in ag and they have that setback that really restricts your land.
But it still gets back to, I'm not against it as long as
What being in the country is
it's A1.
not having neighbors right on.
And your concern, sir, I understand, is that you don't want a subdivision in there.
Right. I mean, you know, I realize that's not gonna happen right now, hopefully, but, you know, on down the road, if they fell on the ground or whatever, or somebody said, oh, I want to put 3 or 4 more houses in there, or whatever. I don't know what all your, you know, legal requirements are.
Well, anytime you split a parcel down, we have a subdivision process that they have to go through, whether it's agricultural or residential, which is a whole zoning process in itself. There's hearings and plats, and it's a pretty complex process. So there is a whole nother set, whether it was A1 or R1, it wouldn't matter.
But if it stays just A1, they can build a house.
Well, you can do an agricultural subdivision as well, so, you know, you could, it's not necessarily a protection.
Not
There's-
changing it now would not prevent someone from asking for a subdivision
Oh, yeah,
later.
right, I understand that.
that
But
would have
sometimes
no
it
effect.
influences conversation.
Sure, sure.
Somebody will say, well, that's already
Right, so
residential.
if we do it now, it's gonna make it a lot easier in the future. If we
Exactly.
don't,
I've seen it happen.
The only issue I have is you set special use permits, and special use permits are like, you know, exceptions to rules. And so if I want to understand a little closer, it looks to me, Eric, like 750 setback where they're proposing to build isn't really, it's not 750 feet?
We haven't taken any precise measurements
Okay.
yet, because that's not the avenue that they're approaching.
when someone
It's
submits one of those
close.
applications, we go out and look at the stakes they set, we do some GPS measuring to next year's residents to give the board adjustment the most accurate information we can for them to consider. What I'm saying is, if that was the avenue they were forced to take, it potentially would limit, well, not potentially, they would be limited to where they can build a house. Whereas R1, if a property is found to be particularly well suited for residential, you only have to meet the R1 setbacks from the road, from your side property line to the rear.
I'm gonna ask as another stupid question probably, Eric, but the access for this site, is that a permitted access today, or is that just,
I don't know if it's recognized, it's probably not recognized as a residential, access, and so, there's usually a process if there's a change in use, that a new entrance permit, that's an automatic regardless of what's done. A person, whether it's rural residents or rezoning, they have to get an entrance permit when required. And certainly that entrance would be potentially different, it would be very small if it's a single, there'd be a whole other process if it's a subdivision main entrance. Larger driveway.
This whole idea of whether it's residential or ag and going ahead and build the house. They have a location based on the geography of it, of where they want to build that house, and if it don't meet the criteria lengthwise, footage-wise for adjacent property owners, and you went ahead and you allowed them to do that through vote, you know what, you're gonna have a hell of a lot of people out there that's gonna be mad because they've been turned down on deals like that. And we're talking about people that spent some heavy dollars on property that should have checked all that out first, but they didn't, and then now they're sitting with the property they can't use for what they purchased.
So I've been thinking about that, exactly that. And after looking at the map, my personal opinion, I would like to table the vote today. I want to know if they can get the 750 feet setback on their proposed location. And if they can, then I would not like to rezone it and let them do the special permit, special use permit. They have, if they can get the 750 feet separation.
But you're thinking, Eric, you haven't measured it, but is it so far out of realistic that they could hit that footage?
I think it's close, just using the ruler function on Magic.
Right, we don't have, it's probably close. I guess my concern would be is if we start considering rezoning requests in light of neighbor opposition or potential, what they could potentially do and not do, and start throwing out the language of our guiding document, our comprehensive land use plan, do we open ourselves up to claims of making decisions arbitrarily? The reason we have a comprehensive plan is to give us something very consistent so that there is a defense against claims of that you're being, that you're picking winners and losers here. It boils down to, is this area generally compatible with, or compatible for residential use? Is it compatible with surrounding land uses? That's where the county's protection is if we are consistently using the language.
I think you're a little off base, because I don't believe that anybody on this board is looking at it from the direction that you insinuated. We just want to make sure that what we do is going to make sense down the road, legal sense, as well as best sense for everybody concerned. I don't think Matt's request is out of line, and I truly don't believe that anybody on here is taking this because we've had some complaints about putting it there and we're worried about what people say. You tell me one time in your relationship with me that you've ever seen me take a position like that. I do what I think is best for the people of the county and what's best, and I believe the whole board stands that way. And I know your passion over this and following the rules because it makes it easier and better. I'm with all that, but I think we also need to look at the path of least resistance that's legal and makes sense.
Right. I guess
that's all we're doing.
What I meant was, if maybe Matt's not saying that he acknowledges that it's a good candidate for residential development. If you think that a portion of it is not conducive to residential development, then you would be certainly within your right and probably correct in not pursuing rezoning. But I would just caution against recognizing that, or stating that you recognize it's a good development area, but then limiting a person to it. But if you think that it's not conducive to rezoning, then certainly rezoning would be a decision that you wouldn't want to go.
When's the last time crops were grown on any of these 4 parcels?
Irrelevant.
Probably never were.
Never? It's been 50 years since you've had livestock on any of these parcels?
Approximately, yes.
To me, it's not a big agricultural use land then. I understand the arguments. Yeah, that's one property, but I look at these properties along here. I see a whole lot of bluff, a whole lot of forest.
How long have you lived in the country?
How long have I lived in the country?
Yeah, have you ever, I mean, did you grow up?
Since,
Well, what's happening?
When I lived in Muscatine, I've lived there since 1993. Then I
Okay.
moved away, then I moved back to the same place.
What I'm saying is, there's a lot of city wanting to move to the country, and they want the serene and the quietness and this and that, but they want to bring all the city rules to the country as well.
I don't like
and that's
that.
what's happening with these developments, and you live in one.
I do. Sure.
So you know about it.
I do.
Well, to
But-
me, that's all irrelevant. To me is what are our rules?
Yeah.
And are we applying them fairly and consistently? And I don't see anything that's being requested here. I kind of side with Eric on this. I think it fits our comprehensive plan. There's nothing in there. I'm concerned about the migration of houses and subdivisions into the fag land as much as anyone. We have plenty of room inside city limits today for lots of development. But that being said, I also think that that's a great site for, probably the only site for the house. I don't want to see them restricted by that.
I don't
If this
either,
is the
but yeah.
means to do it, and we have the subdivision to process to protect it from future development. I don't have any worries
Yeah,
about that.
if the footage is there, and you can go ahead and do what you want to do, if the current laws, ordinances that are in place, why do you want to start changing them
reasons.
or moving around?
Because special use permits are not a good way to make large-scale decisions. Number 2, because we have a comprehensive land use plan that I think is in place for the reasons Eric said, and also because not only is it there to guide us, but it's there to guide folks who live in the county, so they can look at a piece of land and think, okay, I buy this now, here's what it's being used for. I buy this in 20, 50 years, what kind of operation or what kind of use of this land is envisioned by the folks who are making the decisions? It's to give consistency and fairness to those people as well. And if we start deviating from that, and I don't want to say willy-nilly, because that certainly doesn't sound respectful, but if we start deviating from that, we throw into confusion people's expectations of what we're going to do. And you and I both know that land value is based a whole lot on expectations that people have. They buy a piece of land because they want to hold it, and they want to know what's going to be done with it. If we go against our land use plan for reasons that haven't materialized, that cannot materialize without further and subsequent approval by us, then I think we're pulling that whole process in jeopardy. Why have a land use plan?
Exactly, but when the plan's put together, this is why it's so important for residents to take part in that process, which they did not. There were very poor numbers turned out, but besides that, though, that's where those, your thoughts that you're bringing forward now about future usage and past usage, that's where they come into play. And I don't.
This land hasn't been used agriculturally in 50 years. It has a crappy CSR rating. We have checks and balances on the concerns offered by the residents seem to be primarily, we don't want a subdivision in there. Ain't gonna be a subdivision in there unless we or whoever's sitting here at the time it's requested say so. And even if we don't approve it today, someone else down the line, when none of us is sitting here, can make that same request.
Maybe.
I mean, maybe, yeah. Well, nothing can stop them from making it. But this doesn't move us any closer to the subdivision unless we accept an argument of a slippery slope, which hopefully we, as hopefully intelligent folks, don't have to succumb to. Just because a decision has been made trending one way in the past doesn't mean it has to be made again. And I think that if there is opposition to this, we're going to hear from just more than 1 or 2 people in the future. And I want to take those interests and voices into consideration, but I also want to take the larger land use plan that we've developed, with or without a huge amount of public investment, but which the public was certainly welcome to is always welcome to contribute to. I want to take that into account.
I would argue exactly the opposite of your stance on that, because at one point, there was a livestock operation on it. There's never been a subdivision on it, and it could be used for a livestock operation again. Just because it's not doesn't mean it couldn't be.
Sure.
Eric, if the distance is there to build on that lot, does it require then a special usage permit?
Yes.
It's in a separate plot, correct?
There's only two ways a person can build a house, a residence, in A1 zone, in an A1 zone district. One, you're a farmer and you're farm exempt because the property is primarily used for farming. So if you own 40 acres and it was all tillable and you're the farmer, you can build a house, you're exempt from zoning and building.
Which this land will never.
Right. There's no active income producing ag activity that would allow them to enjoy farm exemption.
Let me ask a quick question. Does a definition of farming, legally speaking, mean that we're tilling ground?
Not
Or does it mean,
No.
or does it mean that we are using this for a
There's
grazing
certain number of
operation?
dollars that it has
Just
to-
curious.
Right?
No, our definition of farm does not require a financial threshold or an acreage threshold. Perfect example, some of the large hog confinements, I suppose for financing purpose, take 1 or 2 acres off of some of their farm ground and they parcel it off. They then come to me and they say, I want a farm exemption for the building. Well, there's no tillable ground, it's only 2 acres, but a livestock confinement building is 100% by nature a farm building, so they're given a farm exemption regardless of the small or large acreage that they're on. It's the use of the building. Is it agricultural or not? Is that 2 acres used primarily for agricultural? Yes, if it's for hog confinement. So that's an ag exemption.
But the plot that they want to put the house on, there's nothing on that now, right?
No. None of the 4 parcels in question have any active income
But they can't
producing
put a house
activity.
If my crop is timber, which is a recognized crop by the ag as an ag crop, do I get farm exemption so I can put my house
It's
where I
not
want?
considered an ag commodity.
No, they
Timber
just-
program is more of it's like
Not in Iowa, but
CRP.
it absolutely is by the USDA. There are plantations where they grow timber, goes out south, right, Zach? They're all over the place, and they're considered a crop.
Big time down there.
Big time.
But in the Midwest, it's considered more of an extraction than an agricultural
Right.
commodity under law.
So, see, this is the slippery slope, so that's why you stick to our rules.
Yeah, so they have a bare plot, and they're currently, under the current rules, not allowed to put a house on.
Well, I was getting to the second way a person can build a house, that's the special use permit. Farm exempt or special use permit for a rural residence, through the Board of Adjustment, the one you've been talking about. Only 2 ways you can build a house on A1 zoned property.
And we've approved several special use permits for people to build houses on their properties.
Well, I've seen some apparently got approved I didn't care for, where they were.
But the special use permit, if it doesn't meet setback, they're not gonna do it.
That's up to the Board of
Or, yeah, if
Adjustment.
it doesn't meet the separation distance called out. of 750.
I can only speak to the
Right.
consistency that they've taken on that separation distance in the past, which I believe is appropriate. We don't want to start
Well, it's
eroding that
appropriate,
for the
but
protection of
they use
neighbors.
it a lot, where they've denied a lot. People have bought 40, 50 acres because they have a problem with the curvature of the ground, want to build a house in a certain spot, and it's maybe 10 feet too close to, they can't do it, they get it turned down. So those people, I can see why they would get upset.
So that
Let
seven
something like
fifty,
this go.
does that follow the contour of the ground, or is it a?
It's as the
crow
crow
flies.
As the crow
flies.
flies.
We take a straight line shortest distant measurement from the proposed site to the nearest leading edge of existing.
So in
street.
this process, I have a couple questions for the Swayzes. When did you start this? Trying to build the house?
We started the zoning process back in April.
In April, and you hope to build this year?
Yes.
Yeah, so here we are in June. So
Basically July.
government has taken 5 months of your life, or 4,
We couldn't
over
get
something
we
so
couldn't get on the
simple.
July agenda.
And if we round about and kick this can down the road, it's another 90 days, Eric?
Well, the August 1st, the first Friday in August would be the first Board of Adjustment agenda that they could get on.
So August, so then it's back to us, so it's likely
On that, there's only a review. You guys don't take
Yeah, you
actions on
can't.
special use. So essentially, sometimes we have that the following Monday. We can get that on that's a fairly quick process once it's in front of the Board of Adjustment. But first Friday in August would be the first.
Yeah, if you didn't like what they did, you'd go to court, because that'd be your only choice.
Now, Eric, and maybe I wanna go back to the rationale behind your thoughts here, and that was, if I understand correctly, that our land use plan says that where there are special use permits that might be effective, if that a rezoning to R1 should be considered if it appears to be an appropriate area.
That specific language is actually directly from the special use permit application form, where you're answering questions on the special use rural residence application to, along the lines of CSR, separation distance from houses, separation distance from intensive ag operations, distances to existing city limits, paved roads, et cetera, and then at the very end it says, if the property is particularly well suited for residential, then rezoning it should be pursued in lieu of agriculture.
But that's all a matter of opinion.
An opinion and an interpretation of the guiding language. The guiding language is a portion of what your consideration. Right. Certainly protection of some of our, and I wanted to speak to that just real briefly if I can. I did look at that potential because I do recognize that hog confinements are the way that we raise pork today. And so we have to be aware of potential areas where they can continue to be developed. And so when I looked out in what would be a potential separation area for a new hog confinement, short of the unlikely scenario of off the Burlington Road one, there is nothing that I can see that this house or a development of this area, even if it was more than one house, would affect potential hog confinement along G20, because there's other houses that are already farther west. They would hit it first. Because we do look at that every time. We don't want to paint agriculture in a corner. We can't do that in a county like Muscatine.
But one thing that Jeff mentioned also is there's a lot of ground available for development that's already inside city limits. What's happening is you know, the city is trying to grow into the farmland, and they want to take those same rules and ideals and values. It's a totally different world out there, and they are trying to force their way out there and make it the way they want it, and that's just not the way it should be.
The city isn't an active participant here. The city has nothing to do.
I'm talking about the way of life. It is different from the city to the county, and it's totally different.
I agree. That's fine.
So if you want the city life, you stay in the city.
They don't want the city life. They want a wooded parcel where he grew up and ran around as a kid. I mean, surely you did that.
Well, that's all fine and dandy until they get there, and then there's traffic, dust, smells. Nathan, I've dealt with it. You have not. I've dealt with it personally. It's a hassle.
I understand, but I think people need to be, just because there's room in the city doesn't mean people should only be allowed to build a house in the city.
I'm not saying they should only build a house in the city. You obviously haven't been listening to me. I want these people to build a house on this property, but I don't want to rezone it.
Because you're concerned about the implementation of a subdivision. Yes?
I am
Then you have
worried about it
to Jeff.
affecting a way of life that's already established in that area.
Okay. Number one, I don't know how we know what way of life is established in that area. It's certainly not an agricultural one. Second of
It
all,
absolutely is. Absolutely
on that
is.
parcel, it is not.
Tell me it's not.
Yeah,
You, sir, have a parcel of land next door. This land, how long have you had that parcel?
40 years.
40 years. Have you ever seen this land farmed? Ever used for any?
Different
Yes.
property? No.
Exactly.
It's timber.
Just because, I'm not talking about just their property. I'm talking about all of the property around
Which is
it.
only going to happen upon either subsequent rezoning or subdivision requests, correct? Which
So let
we
them do
have-
it at that time, because that's not what they're after. They're after one house. So let them build one house.
But
And if they want
our
to do
own
it,
rules
if
was-
they want to do a subdivision at a later time, then they can come back and ask for that.
See here, I'm approaching this on a rules-based perspective, and that is that you use rules in the ways that are most advantageous. You don't make exceptions become the rule that swallows the law, and that's what you're looking to do here. Our own special use permit, our own land use comprehensive plan suggests that this is the way to go about things. Now, if we don't like that, let's change that. But let's not deviate from the expectations that we've created in people simply because we don't like the result in one particular case based on what might happen.
Well, then why do we have a special use permit? If we can't use it? If that's the case, then get rid of it.
Well, at this point, we don't know if you can use a special use permit or not.
No, but what I'm saying is table this vote today so we can find out if there is the separation.
And the issue I have with that is you're asking the Swayzes to delay another 90 days plus to do what they should have been able to do 3 months ago, just because some bureaucratic nightmare, and for your personal opinion. And this is your
Right, but
personal
they
opinion.
knew that
We
this
have
land,
protections
when they
in our
bought it,
process.
was already zoned A1.
We have protections in our process.
And if they wanted
You're
to,
dreaming up shit
then they-
that doesn't
This
matter.
is not a city boy, country boy
This is-
conflict here.
Yeah, we're making up, we're trying to come up with reasons not to allow something that our process and our policies say we should allow. That's what I see.
Right.
And we're gonna ask these folks to delay their process another 90 to 120 days because we're concerned of what might happen 50 years from now where we have protections for it already. I think it's unreasonable.
Nothing that anyone fears can happen without another vote by this body.
Period.
And that's what I see.
All we're doing is making it easier for the next body. So, we can vote on it, I'll vote no.
Yes, that's fine. We're in public hearing.
Yeah.
Debating
We
it.
gotta move on at some point.
Yeah. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? We heard from everyone. Anybody else want to comment? If they,
Let me ask one more question. So obviously we've got a pretty sizable split here in philosophy, which is fine. If we vote, and we don't know yet how that vote will turn out, if we vote and it's denied, what happens? Can they reapply? How do we get them their house?
If the rezoning is denied, they would have the opportunity, there's no preclusion from them applying for a special use permit for a rural
And
residence.
what's the timeline like on that?
The first Friday in August would be the soonest Board of Adjustment
And
hearing.
if they approve it, we don't have to approve it subsequently.
You
No, it has
review
to
them,
come to
but
us and
the
we
code doesn't list
accept
any language to reject, like a variance where you can remand back. It's
So
just,
mid-August before they could do anything.
generally, we don't allow a building permit to go out for 30 days after a decision by the Board of Adjustment because of the appeal process.
So mid-September.
Correct.
Okay.
Early to mid-September.
Just wanted to know. Well, it would be 30 days after we review or 30 days after?
30 days after, well, 30 days after the Board of Adjustment, because you're one of the bodies that could appeal in court to stop
see.
it.
I see.
And if you choose not to, basically, it says anybody can appeal the decision of Board of Adjustment. Any neighbor, any board in court.
So first or second week of September, 2.5 months from now, is when it would go final.
Potentially, yes.
Assuming they have not 4 people at the Board of Adjustment hearing, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yep. And they can go forward with 4. It's up to, yeah, it's always up to an applicant to decide whether they want to move forward with a partial board.
Right. I would move to close the public hearing.
Second.
second that. Oh, you got it, Bob?
I've got a motion by Nathan, a second by Bob to close the public hearing. This is a roll call vote. Nathan?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Next is discussion and possible action to approve an ordinance rezoning approximately 44 acres in 76 Township from A1 Ag District to R1 Residential District on the first of 3 readings.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Nathan.
It's a roll call.
This is a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Nathan?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Matt?
No.
I vote aye in the spirit of the comprehensive plan. Motion passes 4-1.
That's-
With that,
I'd just like to thank everyone for coming out. I know no one's ever gonna be made happy by a decision like this. You're never gonna make everybody happy, but as Bob said, it's participation by the residents that shape our county land use plan, and just individual decisions like this, so thank you so much for coming out. I know I speak for everybody on behalf of the board in saying that.
Yeah, and I would probably comment as well that, you know, I'm a proponent, big proponent of individual rights and using your property how you see fit. I'm also a big proponent of following your laws and trying to make things as easy as possible for people within the framework of those laws. And I think that's what, there's obviously was some concern about this because we had a 2-2 vote at the P and Z level. So, you know, it's just the way it goes sometimes, like Nathan said, you know, you always have people on both sides of an issue and you can't always make everybody happy. But I'm confident that this is the right thing to do under the current circumstances. We also have to remember as a board, when you make decisions like this, you set precedents. And so we got to think about that in the future. If we have ordinances that maybe need looked at, maybe approached in a different way or have some thoughts or ideas on it, we need to think about that in the future.
Yep.
And we minimize these situations. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to number 8, item of County Engineer Keith White. Morning, Keith.
Good morning.
A is discussion and possible action to approve a pre-construction agreement for primary road project agreement number 2018C259 for HMA fillets at 9 locations along Iowa 22 east of Muscatine.
I don't know if you had a chance to glance at the agreement, but this is agreement with Iowa DOT to do the road billets on our rock roads along the 22 project there. And of course, it's unit prices and actual quantities govern, but they've came up with an estimate of $120,200. That was with a contingency in there, so we should be in that neighborhood.
Keith, I read through their contract and you know, there's a lot of mumbo jumbo, but it sounded to me like, you know, they're gonna do the work, they're gonna project manage it. We get just the accesses back for maintenance. They're not throwing maintenance at 22 this area to us. Just these approaches.
This is simply for, you know, they have a construction contract out there, and this is simply for us to pay them for this work, because otherwise they wouldn't be doing anything on our roads.
On the approaches.
On the approaches, on the non-paved, which, you know, said we prefer to do that so that the normal DOT policy is they maintain only the shoulder width of the road, which, you know, maybe once or twice a year. So again, if the edge of we have it all the time where we don't have these fillets, you get an edge drop off, we have to literally get out there with the machine and fix that, or the residents are gonna bang through it for 6 months. So we would prefer to not have to have the motor grader sticking out onto the pavement, and just makes a better situation. Plus there's, you know, that's where the turning movements happen. It's just a better maintenance situation for us.
So I'd make a motion to approve that.
I've got a motion by Jeff, a second by Matt. Any more discussion on this? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. B is discussion of possible action to approve various utility permits.
We have 3 utility permits this morning. I had 2 stuck together there. They're all with WTC Communications out of Wilton, Iowa. And the first is to repair fiber optic cable at Taylor and 110th. And it's just a short distance they're working there along 110th right off of Taylor.
Put it in last year, fix it this year.
The second is to replace existing copper cable, and it's basically on 130th between there and Taylor. And the third is, says it's the same thing. This is also to repair fiber optic cable at 110th and Trail. So we might have two of the same. No, they're going around the corner, so they must have done one on the side for each road. So it's kind of all the same, or those two are the same.
What were there, you said 110th and what? Trail or Taylor? I knew what you were saying.
Trail.
Trail? The first one is trailer, Taylor.
It's in
right?
Trail, so this, the other one is, you're right, and the other one
Is
is
Taylor.
Taylor.
Okay,
So
so
they're
I just want to make sure I wasn't hearing wrong.
I got there with Trail and Taylor. Okay.
The maps are correct.
I entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Jeff, second by Matt, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. C, discussion and possible action to approve a contract bond or certificate of insurance for L M18-3 7370 pavement markings.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Matt, any discussion? All in favor?
Do we have,
Opposed?
wait, usually I have a place and an amount?
That's all over the
Yeah,
county.
we got it last time.
Wait, but usually there's through this person for this total amount. You know, it's a it's.
The contract is with Vogel Traffic Services of Orange City
Okay.
for, again, unit prices governed for 93, 439, 97.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm good, Leslie? Okay. D is project updates.
Okay. On the we just approved the pavement marking contracts, and I've mentioned before, Zachary and 160th was completed, that intersection repair. The contract documents for the Iron City box, which we had the letting on, have been sent out. They're not back yet from the contractor. The G28 sub drains and culvert repairs, we had set a letting here for July 9th. And seal coat and reclamation projects. The bid documents have been sent out, and we're having an informal, because this is maintenance, an informal bid opening on the 11th. And so subsequent to that, we'll be bringing results to you. And still working on the 231st Street or G28 paving project. And working on potential thin asphalt overlays on Kelly Avenue, Bancroft Avenue, the west end of G28, Wildcat Den, and expect to get done soon. Depends on where we get on total dollars on that. We had mentioned before, we had some of that in this year, which we couldn't go to some things because of RAGBRAI and the Highway 22 construction. So it'll probably be a lot giving them, certainly in the next year, something like Wildcat Den, I'm guessing probably wouldn't happen until next year. And also, since normally Ella was the only person that bids our projects and they're fairly busy out there, I think they can get part of this, assuming they're the successful bidder. I think they can get part of this, but not all of this yet this calendar year. And I guess one of the next things we're working on is the Iron City box up by 130th, or bridge, which we're going around and eliminating the structure. And then right-of-way purchasing on Bridge 160, which is up by West Liberty. I think that covers everything. Questions?
Any questions? No? Very good. Anything else then, Keith?
I don't believe I have anything else.
All right. Thank you so much. Number 9, discussion and possible action to approve the minutes of the June 18, 2018 regular meeting and June 20th, 2018 special meeting for long-range planning. Second. Motion by Bob, second by Nathan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 10, correspondence. Bob, do you have anything?
Nothing.
Nathan? Nope. I had a call from a resident that sits on the RAGBRAI route and just was inquiring what they could possibly do in regard to a possible sale of drinks and things of that nature, and I called Eric on that situation, and he gave me the contacts. I responded back to the resident, and the resident was going to do some investigating of their own, and that was all I had for correspondence. Jeff?
Nothing.
Matt?
Nothing.
Committee reports, Matt? No? Jeff?
On Wednesday, the 20th, they had the Wilton Development Corporation.
Okay. Let's see here. On Thursday, the 21st, at the Fair Board, and they're working diligently moving forward with the up-and-coming fair, obviously. I just wanted to report the success of their weekend of the fair fundraiser event that they do with their auctions and food and the Adam Cunningham concert event and so on. In a nutshell, when it was all said and done, they raised a total of slightly over $25,000 on that particular day. So everybody was pretty pleased with that, and I thought they did a nice job, and it was interesting to hear some of the fair members talk about the individuals that they encountered on the street that had heard how well the concert event had gone and so on and so forth, that didn't participate. You know, that adage on the street of, boy, I heard that went well, what have you. And of course the response is, you should have been there. And so there's been some requests from people that did go and did participate, and maybe some that did not, that heard good things about it, that thought that they would like to see in the future, maybe another concert or two. So maybe this is something they can work on as well to help generate dollars there.
How did their revenue, how did the results compare to prior years? Significantly better, about?
It's significantly better because it's an unfair comparison in the sense that everything is the same except the concert. So you had to take the cash flow of the concert into this. Take the concert out of it, and I'm just going to rub this in my head real quick. Take the concert out of it, and it's still on the high side of average, I'll put it that way, so I don't misspeak. So, that's all I had on committee reports. Nathan?
I had on Monday the meeting of the Eastern Iowa Mental Health and Disability Services Region. We, at long last, had our vote on whether to approve a series of one-time funding applications. By a little bit of background, when we got the legislative changes to mental health funding from a couple sessions ago, we were instructed that we had to spend down this large fund balance that we had. And so one of the things that we did in order to do that was to entertain one-time funding applications, not salary or the like, but you know, if people had a project that was particularly worthy, we consider that. I would say we got something like almost $4 million in applications. The management team went through it and selected out about 1.6, 1.8, something like that, in applications that they recommended be approved. But then the legislation changed just immediately past session to where no longer do we have to spend down this fund balance. In fact, we had a much larger set of obligations that the state put on us without expanding our funding stream. So all of a sudden, instead of trying to get rid of money, we were looking at having negative money in 2 to 3 years. In light of that, I and one other board member said, this is not a time when we need to be considering giving money away in one-time funding applications, which in fact, if you review the applications, I'd say about 95% were not one-time funding applications at all, but were applications for salary. So, you know, I guess I don't blame folks for trying, but it wasn't in my mind a one-time thing anyway. Well, he and I, and this was Sean Hammerlink in Clinton County, voted against it on the principle that we're going to run out of money, we don't need to be handing it out. However, we were outvoted by 3 other members. You know, and I have no qualms with the quality of the programs. I think they were all excellent programs. You know, and I'm happy to see some of them be initiated or continue, among them the mental health board for Scott County that hopefully can one day be expanded to other counties in the region. But as I said, it's I think consistent with my philosophy and probably with this board's philosophy is that you don't spend money that you don't need to where you're running out of money. But we were defeated. So that's that.
Wants and needs, Bob.
It's gonna come back and bite us. You
Oh,
wait and
boy.
see.
It is. It's not gonna be good.
And it's gonna be small companies there. I told you so.
Yeah, it's still $2 million.
You don't wanna get me started on wants and needs yourself.
Well, with that being said, how about any committee reports on your behalf, Bob?
All right, I had Conservation Board Monday night, and I just briefed a little bit to you guys on Tuesday morning when we had our in-depth session. And so basically the discussions held then were potential movement of the bike stand. They're still going through with that process. They're trying to put some dollars and cents figures to it. They had the local bike club working on that with them in conjunction with the Conservation Board. The idea of it's going to be at the entry to Deep Lakes Park up there on 47th. So there's still, a lot of this stuff is just, they're still gathering information on how they're going to handle all that. Discussion was held too on the topic that we had regarding the drinking water and what we're going to have down there and not have. So I also had the sheets that I gave to Nathan, and he'll pass on down the line. And this is year-to-date numbers for some of the kids that come in and do these programs at the Conservation Board hours. I'm always, it's an exciting thing for me. I love to see what they do out there and the involvement. I will say this, they're a little disappointing from the standpoint that they're off from last year, and we're trying to figure out why that is, but they're still good numbers, still a lot going on out there. And then on Tuesday, I had the Milestones Area of the Aging Executive Board meeting, and I don't know if what I'm about to say is positive or negative, because you don't know what the state, but they did come back and say to us that there may not be any more cuts. It wasn't will, it was may, and we'll see how that goes. Fortunately for our group, we're got that balanced budget going, and we're working on trying to complete membership in our advisory boards, which we have 3. The district that I am over is 17 counties, and we've got 3 advisory boards in there, and redefining or trying to give, I guess we're trying to define what the advisory boards are there for and what they do and what they don't do and what power they have and they don't have. But we've finalized a lot of that stuff at Tuesday's meeting. So I'm working with them a little bit on trying to, in the near future, I hope it's the near future, of being able to give some type of presentation to our board, because I think most of you folks aren't real clear on everything they do and what they don't do. This week, I believe it is, our CEO is supposed to have a meeting with Senior Resources CEO. You and I, we talked about this, that it was coming. So I guess I thought they maybe had it. When I asked how it turned out, they said no, they weren't able to get their dates lined up. So it's going to be, I think, this week. So as soon as I hear something on how that works.
Is that still Pete?
No, he's no longer doing that, and that would be Joni Epps.
Oh, Joni, okay. All right, that's right.
Oh, and I previously met with her, and we've discussed quite a few things, and now we'll see where some of this stuff goes.
That'll be a good meeting, I'm sure.
Well, I'm sure it will be too. I'm looking forward to it, you know. You have to look for these I know you've been, Jeff, personally, doing a lot in Muscatine area here on trying to get more groups working together and be more effective and efficient that way, and cost savings and get better results. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with that. So that's all I had this past week.
Okay, thank you. Next is receive information from county employees. Keith?
I would be remiss if I didn't speak about the flooding events of last week. I kind of missed that. But, you know, the rains were spotty across the county, but a week ago we had 4 inches in our rain gauge at the office, and then a few days later we had 4 more. In some areas, I think some had next to none, some had a lot more than that. We had a number of roads we had to close with flooding, water over the road. In relative terms, I'm going to say no significant damage. We were out Thursday, and then there were people in on Friday, even though they're on the 410s, fixing at least temporarily those areas. We've had a couple spots that, I mean, the road's not closed, but the repairs are going to be rather costly. And I really wanted to mention that because there's more rain in the forecast. If we're still saturated, then we're going to flood pretty quickly.
And I'd like to point out that it seems to me that in a general line, west of 38 picked up substantially more rain than east of 38.
Yes.
Substantially more. So it was really apparent how that came to be.
It was, and that's exactly right. West of, and just north of town was where we had a lot of water over the roads on ice at 170th and Bayfield and 180th. We've got quite a bit of damage there.
Did we have any incidents of cars getting stalled or carried away or anything like that?
No.
Good.
No.
Don't drive it, people.
Yeah, we were out there and had closures up pretty quickly, and a lot of it did go down pretty quickly, and some was minor damage. Some will wash some pretty deep ruts that you wouldn't want to hit in your car. So, that's all I got.
All right, thank you, Keith. 13, items with the administration office. A is discussion and possible action to approve a request to hire a building, zoning, and environmental inspector in the zoning office.
This is coming to you because according to our salary administration program, if a department head requests to hire above minimum, I cannot approve that. It comes to you guys for approval. Eric is requesting to hire this person in at a grade 5, or step 5 of the grade. Frankly, he only got 4 applications. I would say 2 qualified applications, and this salary is what it's going to take to get the person in the door.
What is it? How much?
It's $47,316.
Oh, yeah.
His position is to cover the inspections?
Yes.
You guys authorized him to hire a second inspector.
So how will this guy work with?
Sorry.
It's all right. Hey Siri. How will this guy's work dovetail with the gentleman we hired out of Iowa City? Is there any overlap? Or right now, the person out of Iowa City is simply, we have an agreement to perform commercial and industrial plan review functions.
Good.
This will be primarily residential, because in some industrial, as we continue to develop that program, but for large industrial plan reviews, we just essentially contract out. But this will be an inspector. That person obviously is not an inspector currently for us.
What kind of experience do you have? This person does not have any prior experience as a building inspector. They have they've worked in general building maintenance in commercial buildings more recently. So, but again, like Nancy said, we only had 4 applicants, and we weren't being flooded with people who were building inspectors at all. With 1 applicant that had all the criteria that we wanted, wouldn't accept anywhere within our pay scale. So we're kind of starting with someone who will have to receive training and work experience, but does understand he has to pass that electrical inspector certification with 12 months.
Yeah, that's not always bad either. It's to train the individual, if you can get some longevity.
Is this the person that you want?
Well,
Are we hiring because we only had 4 applicants, or are we hiring because this is the person you want?
well, I can only hire within from the applicants that I have. Ideally, I had a candidate that stood out, that was our first choice, but couldn't hire anywhere within, wanted more money than this grade even allowed in step 20, and didn't at that time have the ability or the desire to work full-time either, so that applicant basically took themselves right out. Out of the remaining 3, this is the person that I want based on interview, I believe personal skills, conflict resolution, temperament, and, and with some relative work experience shown through previous jobs, ability to learn and progress to higher levels. But no, I mean, I would have loved to have someone that's been a certified building inspector for 5 years.
We don't have, with the information we was given, we don't have his application or anything, do we? All we have is your
Right.
process.
But I don't typically give you
Well,
applications.
I know, but that's fine.
We don't
I
want
just,
applications for liability purposes.
Yeah.
I just would like to know more about the applicant.
See it as Sagittarius.
Not that information.
I'll move to approve.
Got a motion by Jeff, second by Nathan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. B, discussion and possible action authorizing the chair to execute the FY 18-19 contract for specialized transportation services with Riverbend Transit in the amount of $7,000.
Move to approve.
Motion by Jeff, second by Nathan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. C, discussion and possible action authorizing the chair to execute a preferred provider agreement between the Center of Alcohol and Drug Services, Inc., referred to as CADS, in Muscatine County.
This is simply a renewal of an agreement that we already have in place. It allows us first access for when we have to do substance abuse commitments, and there's no change in their proposed rates.
Move to approve.
Motion by Jeff, second by Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. D, discussion and possible action to approve terms of HIPAA compliance consulting services with Karos Compliance Solutions in the amount of $14,750.
This is something that we had talked about quite a while back, and before you guys move forward with it, you wanted me to speak with our insurance carrier about the benefits of doing this. The response back from our insurance carrier is your insurance rates are assumed on are based on an assumption that you've already done this.
Well, we've used these folks before.
These are the folks who did the HIPAA compliance for the region. The county has never done HIPAA compliance.
Maybe on something different with them? Do they offer other services? This name's come up before.
Right, we talked that this guy came and did a presentation to you months ago.
He did a presentation, gave us a big book to read.
Yeah. I did check with other entities that have used these people's service, and they have felt that it went well.
I spoke to the other counties and they've used them.
They do a lot of the, I mean, they take a lot of the load off the staff people to get the policies in place. This primarily affects community services in terms of projected health information that's transmitted. I will say there was some language in the agreement that I made them take out before I would bring this to the board. There was a lot of language in there about us essentially helping them market their business afterwards by putting information on our website and links. And I had all of that removed before this came to you.
Who gets to be our privacy security officer?
Well, I think probably what will happen is that will be Bill Riley. I'll be one of them. Bill Riley will be the other one. But we want to work with the company about what makes sense there, and then obviously we'll bring that back to you to actually formally make those designations once we've worked through that process.
Not going to add hours a week to your job.
I hope not.
And this 14,000, almost 15,000, that's per year.
No, that's that's a the 15,000. That would be that's for them to help us develop, do their review, help us develop the policies and procedures, and then.
Doesn't the state already have a set of policies and procedures?
You have to actually do an analysis of your computer system, your whole practice. So it's very hard to take just a canned set of policies and procedures and effectively apply them without some substantial work from somebody, from a county employee, to work through that process.
This whole thing's a crime. It's a way to get lawyers' jobs, but the violation could be like $11,000 a day.
Yeah.
And these prices, I've checked around the county around the region with the other counties who've hired them, and it's right in line with their expectations and what they've paid. And kind of a hold up, not by the company, but by the federal government.
I just sit here and keep thinking, if we didn't collect that information, we wouldn't have to do this. Why would we
You can't run your community services.
Yeah.
I mean,
we shouldn't. I don't know. It's like at some point you got to just quit spending money to do.
So let's say for some reason we would come out of compliance with this. Are they on the hook for it then?
if they advise us incorrectly, yes. If they sign off on, because they give you basically a clean bill of health certificate at some point, and if they sign off on a policy or procedure that is not kosher, you can rely on that for your defense.
And so the 14,750, back to the question, that's the one-time cost. After that, their annual support charge at this point is $2,000 a year. We can choose whether we want to continue that after the first year. And that's basically, yeah, that's basically them keeping an eye on anything that might change in terms of the federal laws and making sure that we remain in compliance in terms of our policies and procedures.
Well, I'm just curious, that our insurances have been quoted with the thought process that we were already involved with a firm of this nature. I'm just curious what the insurance quote would be if we did not.
My guess is it would be a carve out, and it wouldn't be a question of a rider.
Wouldn't be good with it.
Yeah. We would have, we would have
Do you
no
like having
protection.
roads? I'm afraid is the answer we would get.
Okay, I'll move to approve.
Second.
Begrudgingly.
Motion by Jeff, second by Nathan. I just don't feel the enthusiasm on this. I feel like we're painted into the corner of the room. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. E, discussion and possible action to approve resolution 06-25-1802, FY 2018-19 budget appropriations.
Move to approve.
Motion by Jeff. Second by Matt. Any discussion?
I have a question.
I knew you would.
Didn't see Sherry around here, but we're a little over 33 mil on that. Does that fit the budget that we
Yes.
approved? There was no additional on that?
No, this is the budget this resolution allows the departments, the county, to spend the money that you budgeted for next fiscal year.
So that's exactly what we,
Yes.
okay. That's all I needed to know.
This is a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Nathan? Aye. And I vote aye. Motion
Was that
passes.
meant to be a derogatory comment about you knew I
No,
would?
sir, it was not.
Okay.
I've worked with you enough to know that how your steps work. Thank you.
Talked to my wife, haven't you?
F, schedule fiscal year and cash counts.
Yep, every year at the close of the fiscal year, state auditors require us to do a cash counts of any of our departments that have petty cash on hand. And so we typically divide, they prefer to have the board members themselves do that, so we typically divide it up between the departments, up between the five of you. The goal, the option would be to either come and schedule and do that cash counts with the departments late in the day Friday, or Monday morning before they open for business.
I am volunteering to do zoning and
Engineer?
engineer.
I'll do whatever I did last time.
Yeah, what was the sign up for?
I did, I've always done for the last several years, the sheriff and civil office, and jail and all that, I can do that as well.
So that leaves conservation, the treasurer's office, and then typically one person does auditor, recorder, assessor, and county attorney.
What day does that have to be done?
It needs to be close to the end of the day on Friday, the 29th, this Friday, or else Monday morning before they open for business.
Well, I did conservation, I know.
Yeah, so, all right.
What else did I do last time?
I think you just did conservation last time.
Is that all you would do? Then I'll do the rest if you want.
Do you want
I
to,
did treasurer last time.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Is-
sorry, I thought you guys.
will that work for you to come and do that?
I'll do that next Monday morning.
Okay, I'll let them know you're coming Monday morning.
So who's that leaving with?
That leaves you with auditor, recorder, assessor, and county attorney. They're all, the small ones, pretty quick. Typically, the departments are gonna have everything, kind of, if they know when you're coming, they have everything set up, ready to go. So it doesn't take you very long.
I'll do Monday morning as well.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I'll contact Melissa, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think I have her. Send me her contact with you. I think
I
we
will.
usually do it Friday, I think she likes.
Yep.
When will Amy be back in the office?
I believe she's back tomorrow.
I'll hit Jill at the end of the business day on Friday.
Okay.
Okay. we get that settled?
Oh, yeah.
And we do have sheets for you guys, that we typically give you sheets. I didn't grab those before the meeting, so I will ask Sherry to prep those while we're in closed session. So you can have those before you leave.
Anything other, Nancy, on your end?
I don't think I have anything else.
Okay. With that, we're gonna go into a short recess. It's 11:04, and we'll reconvene at, it'll take 10 minutes, 11:14. Thank you.